Hi guys, I'm back with another video. Today's video is actually going to be a very special video. I don't really do videos like this a lot on the channel by just talking, but today is May 12th, 2025, and it is the 80th anniversary of Thomas and Friends. And this video is basically me talking about my history with Thomas and Friends and why Thomas and Friends is important to me. And I'm basically celebrating the 80th anniversary of Thomas and Friends, Thomas the Tank Engine, whatever you want to call it. So, my history with Thomas and Friends started like most people's. Thomas and Friends has been out since 1984. The original TV series turned 40 years old last year, and the Railway series turns 80 years old this year. So, why not celebrate it by making a video talking about why it's important to me? So, like most people's histories with Thomas and Friends, I started watching it from a very young age. I can't remember the exact memory of when I first started watching it. I think I was probably, I'm going to have to say, maybe 3 or 4 years old when I started watching it. And I pretty much have loved it ever since. Thomas and Friends is important to me because it has a lot of moral values that shows do not have nowadays. You guys know I have made a couple rant videos and a couple of kids' cartoons on the past. I did a rant video on Caillou, and I did a rant video on Teen Titans Go. And whenever I compare a good show to a bad show, I compare Thomas and Friends to Caillou, and I'm like, Thomas and Friends is better than Caillou because Thomas and Friends doesn't talk down to children. It has moral values and it teaches kids life lessons. And I have been basically in the community my whole life, and there is a lot of YouTubers out there that make Thomas and Friends content. Now, really, I'm not a Thomas YouTuber. I don't really make a lot of Thomas and Friends YouTube videos on my channel. Though I did do that fan film about 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was pretty good because I don't really get a lot of Thomas and Friends fan films to review on my channel, because most Thomas and Friends related stuff are either fan movies, fan series, or that and the like. But Thomas and Friends is important for me because it teaches kids moral values, it teaches them life lessons, and Thomas and Friends can do the moral values and teach them life lessons in an interesting way to keep them engaged and to keep them interested in watching the show. And basically, unlike Caillou and Teen Titans Go, the show doesn't talk down to kids. So that's why I've always loved Thomas and Friends, and that's why I've always enjoyed it. And Thomas and Friends could be dark sometimes. They have talked about a lot of dark subjects like death, and I applaud the creators and everybody who has ever worked on Thomas and Friends for that. And Thomas and Friends has been a very important show in my life. It's been there for the good times, it's been there for the bad times, and it's just been there when I've needed to watch it. And sometimes I do watch it still, even though I'm a 21-year-old man why are you watching a little kid show? And I'm like, well, it's because the show is good. Um, you know, I think any show could be good and it could appeal to any age if the show is good, and Thomas and Friends is. And, this year it's the 80th anniversary. I'm 21 and Thomas and Friends is 80 years old. And that's like, Thomas and Friends is like, uh, let's see, it's basically 59 years older than me. Um, and it's a major accomplishment to be 80 years old. When Thomas and Friends turns 100, I will be 41 years old. I'll be 41. Thomas will be 100, and I don't know if I'll be making YouTube videos, but yeah, Thomas and Friends is very important to every generation that has came before and after it. And I think the show is going to continue on. I think little kids are going to keep watching it until the end of time. Of course, Thomas and Friends and the history, they've done a lot of good things, but they've had a lot of major setbacks. Thomas and the Magic Railroad was a box office failure. The hit entertainment era of Thomas and Friends was hit or miss. A lot of people dislike the Sharon Miller era. Mattel had a setback with Big World, Big Adventures, and then we've got All Engines Go. But I don't really want to talk about All Engines Go. I want to talk about Thomas and Friends. And Thomas and Friends is just a very important show to me. I'm extremely happy that the Railway series has been around for 80 years. The show has been around for 40. It's just a major milestone. And, the other day, Mattel, major W for Mattel, good job on them. They actually get a W for me. In the past, I've hated on Mattel because of their decision to do All Engines Go, but I give Mattel 2 thumbs up and a W for releasing the 1983 pilot of Thomas and Friends. And I watched that pilot the other day, and it came out before the 80th anniversary, and every Thomas and Friends fan out there has wanted it. And it was a major W for the lost media community that it was found. And that was very important because people have been looking for the 1983 Thomas and Friends pilot for years. So that was special that Mattel had a big W by releasing it onto YouTube for everybody to watch. And I'm happy that was released because, it came out a couple of days before today, May 12th, 2025, the 80th anniversary of Thomas and Friends. And this whole year has been the 80th anniversary. And it was a major accomplishment, a big W by Mattel to release the 1983 pilot. So good on them. And overall, so far this year for Thomas and Friends, it's been very good. We've gotten a 1983 pilot. We've gotten a bunch of other stuff. The Thomas and Friends community is alive and well, and people are creating content. I've seen the content this year. It's been very good, even though I'm not really a Thomas and Friends content creator. I'm not a Thomas YouTuber, but the Thomas and Friends has a very special place in my heart. This video is me talking about why Thomas and Friends is important to me. And I hope you guys have taken a little time out of your day to watch this video on me talking about why Thomas and Friends is important and special to me. And just me saying happy birthday to Thomas and happy anniversary to every Thomas and Friends community person out there. and I hope everybody is having a great day. Happy 80th anniversary, Thomas and friends. And if you guys like this video, please don't forget to please like, subscribe, and comment. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace, period.